In this video, I'm going to show you how I went from this awful disaster of a garage to a very organized space on a budget. I had 5 specific problems to address, and we're going to walk through all 5 of them to show you how you can do the exact same thing. I had these 4-foot particle board shelves that were falling apart and sagging under the weight of the heavy tools that were on them. Before I could move them to put workbench where I wanted, I had to replace the shelves. So I went to a big box store to get some 1932 plywood. I hate particle board. It doesn't hold up in any kind of humidity or excess weight above it. So there was no question I needed to replace it. Since I had just finished my table saw workbench, I was able to cut these shelves without too much trouble. And yeah, I've seen the comments on my video about how you should wear gloves with the table saw. I mean, based on the comments on that video, it's a wonder I made it till I was almost 50 with all of my digits. But in all seriousness, it's not good to wear gloves when you're operating a table saw. You can catch the glove and pull your whole hand right into it. These shelves aren't the best, but with the new 4x8 sheets of plywood, I can actually restack it and move them over to get to the next part of the project. These hurricane shutters on the floor preclude me from being able to push a workbench up flush against the wall. So what's the solution? Let's build a shelf up top and actually just move the hurricane panels up to the top side where they're not in my way anymore. I'm using my DeWalt laser level and Tapcon concrete screws to hang these shelf brackets. My entire garage is surrounded by 8-inch concrete filled cinder blocks. So concrete screws are the only way that I'm going to be able to secure these shelves without them falling down. I bought 20-inch brackets because I knew that these panels were just a little bit wide and I needed at least a 15-inch wide shelf to be able to support this weight. Galvanized steel storm panels weigh about 2 pounds per foot in length. So a 5-foot long storm panel weighs about 10 pounds and a 10-foot panel, which is what these are, weigh around 20 pounds. I have 8 of them. Thanks, Florida. So we're realistically only talking about 160 pounds, but each pair of the heavy-duty shelf brackets that I'm installing supports up to 1,000 pounds. I've got 2 pairs installed, so 4 total, and my hope is that that load never comes down. The last step is to bench press each one of these shelves above my head, and look, here's a good use for gloves finally. I would rather have hurricane-proof sliding glass doors and eliminate the whole problem together, but sometimes you just deal with the cards you're dealt. And speaking of dealing with the cards I'm dealt, I just finished installing this dedicated 20-amp 4-plug 2-outlet circuit over on this side of the garage for a workbench. Unfortunately, I didn't think ahead, but I would love to have a switch circuit here that I can use to turn the lights in the workbench off and on. And to do that, all I need to do is add some conduit that I had laying around to another J-box and run some 12-gauge wire from the outlets all the way up to the top of this box where I can plug in the lights and put in a switch and an outlet for it. So I'm gonna run some 12-3 wire that gives me an extra pot leg in there in case I want to tap off of that and add another outlet one day. For now, I'm only going to use the hot, the neutral, and the ground to power up the switch and have the switch control the outlets. This is a fairly simple process. I got started with electrical wiring 20 or 30 years ago when I worked for a commercial electric company, and we ended up wiring up the Logan's Roadhouse in Huntsville, Alabama, one of the first ones that opened up. I worked there that summer and learned quite a bit about electrical. In this circuit, all I'm doing is running a hot leg up from the outlet straight to the switch, and then I'm going off of the switch to this outlet, and this outlet's going to be completely switched so that I can plug my lights into it and the vacuum cleaner that I'm going to use. I've done everything from simple electrical circuits all the way up to very complicated network closet installs for businesses, so I love this aspect of it. For part number 4, I actually looked around my garage, and you can see behind this shelf that there is a pegboard, and as I cleared things out, I thought, man, this pegboard could actually be useful. So I went ahead and crafted some of the excess 4x8 shelves that I had as a hanger for the pegboard, and I needed to again use Tapcon concrete screws to screw in these little sheets of, I think they're about 4 inches tall, of plywood that are just as wide as the pegboard. I wanted to hang them level on both sides. In just a second, I'm going to cover how you can do all of these things on a budget, just like I did with this one. The thing you have to remember about pegboards is when you slide those little peg hooks through, they have to go all the way through the pegboard and hook on the other side. So there has to be a little bit of clearance on the other side. The pegboard can't actually be flush with the wall. I also found this old ball holder mounted over on this side. It was left from the previous owner. It was an easy move to push it up top and then use it to store all those excess balls we have. I found a business that was getting rid of this 24-inch deep 7.5-foot industrial shelf with wire shelvings on it, and I thought that would make a perfect workbench for some of the accessories that I have sitting off on the side. I took it apart from the business and went ahead and reassembled it when I got it to the garage so that I could make a workbench out of it. If I hadn't moved those hurricane shutters from down on the floor, there's no way that this shelf could have set flush with the wall. Then I got to work installing some of these 3-foot lights that I picked up from a home improvement store. I bought 4 of them and they daisy chain into each other and then plug into the switched outlet that I set up. After I was done with that, I tied them up with wire ties for a nice clean look when I was done. One of the things I wanted to do was to get rid of the air compressor sitting out by itself, taking up space. I took the bottom wire shelf and cut out just enough width off of it so that I could fit the air compressor underneath my workbench. Now I did have to tilt the air compressor up and pull the shelf over just to make it fit, and if I ever have to pull it out, it's going to be an issue. But for now, it fits perfectly in there right beside the wire shelving, and I still have storage space right next to it. I finished putting up the wire shelves for the top of the workbench, and then I plugged in my air compressor. The height of the workbench was dictated on how tall this air compressor was, so it's probably a little bit taller than most would actually use for the height of a workbench. You may be thinking, well, that's great and all, but you said on a budget. So I did a quick marketplace search, and while I did get my workbench for free, there are several shelves that you can use out there, even dilapidated ones that you can repurpose and cut your own plywood for to use in your own garage for cheap. I was able to replace the shelves made of MDF on this workbench for less than 60 bucks. I got some $15 wall brackets to move some of those heavy items up for less than 60 bucks. I added easy electrical and lights for less than 70 bucks, and then I moved an old pegboard, which you can also find on Marketplace, for less than 10 bucks. And finally, I repurposed an old workbench that you can find on Marketplace for less than 100 bucks. So overall, this is a pretty cheap effort. I plan on doing an entire series on how I organize my garage, so make sure that you like and subscribe to stay tuned for future videos. On this side is where I added the extra electrical outlets, and up top you can see where I moved those 10-foot long hurricane shutters from down on the floor against the wall to up above out of my way. I stacked coolers on top of the workbench to get those out of the way, and then I went ahead and put all my tools on the workbench with some wood and other things below it. I also stored the air compressor, the generator, my welder, and then right next to it a pressure washer, and then on that shelf there's a pancake compressor and another generator, so I was able to get those things up off the floor and out of the way. I've got some leftover weed eaters and things from farm work that we used to do, but overall I'm really happy with this. I was able to plug in my bench grinder, my 20-plus-year-old drill press that I just replaced the belt on and is still working great, what they call a Rockwell table saw, but to me is really just a glorified scroll saw, and finally my A-frame press. You can see over on this side that I added a 30-amp twist lock outlet, and that is connected to an extension cord that has these 20-amp plugs on the end of it, so I can run my welder outside of the garage and not have to do it really close to the outlet and make sure I have enough amperage for the whole thing. I stored some extension cords up there. I do have a car charger down here for an electric car, plus some additional outlets, so that ended up working out really well along with my toolbox and the rest of the tools back here. There's the 4 plugs that I had initially added for this 20-amp circuit, and then there's the switched plug for the lights that are on top of the workbench. I'm so happy with how this turned out. It allowed me to get all those tools off where I can use them whenever I need them and not have to set them up individually. They're stored off to the side, and then of course I have the main rolling table saw workbench that I built. There's a video and I'll link to it on how I built this and put it together. It's got over 400,000 views now, so be sure and watch that now if you haven't seen that. But come back for more as I continue to organize my garage and give you some great organizational tips and ideas. Thanks for watching.